Okay. So I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Jon Moser. I'm the CEO at Finalsite, and I have some wonderful panelists with me again. This is our fourth COVID-19 webinar that we are putting on. I will get into introducing all of those in a few minutes. But again, as we go through this, a lot of you have been on webinars before. Please pose your questions in the box. We will answer them at the end. This is being recorded also. We'll be able to share this out to you, and you'll be able to share it with whoever you want to as we go down the road. We do have some poll questions we'll be asking as we go through this to kind of get where everyone's at. So why don't we get started? So one thing that's amazing, we started this back, some schools in January, some schools in March, some schools in April, depending on where you are around the world. And I gotta tell you, everyone on this panel, everyone on this webinar, we've been on a journey and we've been hiking up a mountain. And we're not even sure what's on the other side. It's really hard to tell where we're gonna be. But we have accomplished a lot. Everyone has. Schools have been in school, out of school. Kids have been educated in a lot of cases. Some schools weren't able to pull it off. But one thing we have done is shared information. It's come together as a world, as a country, in a lot of ways. And I think this panel here is an example of schools helping one another and really bringing this together. And I want to say, from my seat at Finalsite as a CEO, my goal is to get people together, and I want as many of our schools back in the fall in person as possible, but I also want them to have the ability to teach online and be able to augment with whatever happens, because we really don't know. But we're all on this journey together, and I look forward to getting started today. So one thing that's been amazing, we've been, again, talking to schools all over the world. Finalsite has schools in 80 countries around the world, and we've gotten amazing feedback. We're having questions like, how do we do virtual tours? How can we do virtual fundraising better? Or how do we prepare for the fall? How are we engaging with our students? How are we doing assessments? How are we going to live stream things more? What are you posting on social media? What are you doing for the kids' safety at the school? Are you live streaming events? What are you going to do in the fall? So these are all questions that have been coming forth. So we wanted to start out and just poll the audience that is with us today and ask some questions to kind of see where everyone's at before we get into introductions. So if MJ or Debbie would post the poll, there we go. So this is live, you can see it updated. So a lot of schools have things in place. One reason they have things in place is because they were forced to put it in place, right? Everyone had to augment and pivot and make sure that they were ready. But a lot of schools aren't sure exactly of how everything's gonna come together. All right, I'm gonna move on now. Thank you for that information. We're gonna share the results with everyone so you can see. And it's pretty interesting. We have scenarios in place, but are working on plans. And I really hope our schools have a flexible plan, but you could go back to school with 3 options and be pretty clear on what it's gonna be. Okay, so let's move on here. So Jon Mickton and Wayne and Chuck, I'd like you just to unmute yourself quick. Jon, tell us a little about yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jon Mickton. I'm at the International School of Luxembourg in Luxembourg, and I'm the head of education and media technology. And we have been back at school since May 11th, but with very complex dynamics that have been imposed on us, or guides from the Ministry of Education of Luxembourg, and I can talk about that a little later. But we are back in school in some fashion.
Thank you, Jon. Look forward to hearing about that. Wayne?
Hi, my name's Wayne Rutherford, and I dress just the same as that, so you can make sure that you know who I am in the panel. I'm at the American School of Milan. I've been here only since August. I've been the head of 4 schools internationally. I've spent my career abroad since 1991 when I started as a high school English teacher in Manila in the Philippines. ASM's been closed since February, and we continue to be online, and we'll close our school year with 17 weeks of online learning. So look forward to hearing about other schools' opening plans as we continue to work on our own.
Thank you, Chuck. And one of our goals here was to pull people from all parts of the world, from China, Singapore, Europe, and the US. Chuck.
Hi, my name is Chuck Putney. I'm from Central Catholic High School in Massachusetts, and we have been closed since March, and this is our last week of classes. It's been a long haul, and we are just starting to think about opening in the fall and all the scenarios and the uncertainty surrounding the phased reopening of the state. And I'll get into a lot of that, but I'm happy to be here and happy to learn from the other panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Philippa.
Hi there, I'm Philippa Scotts. I work at Camford School, which is a traditional British boarding school based in the UK, where I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications. And I've been here for 10 years, but I've been in schools communications for around 17. Camford closed its gates on the 18th of March, and then we had a couple of days of remote learning till the end of term. And we have spent the whole of this term with remote teaching and not planning to reopen until September. So we're just working on plans of how we reopen and in what form. So really interested to hear what other schools around the world have been doing as well on that.
Thank you and welcome. Kevin.
Hey, I'm Kevin Lynch. I'm Director of Marketing and Communications at Shanghai American School. And we headed off for our Chinese New Year break on January 22nd and did not come back till May 6th. Since then, we've had kind of a rolling opening, started with 11th and 12th grades, and now we have grades 1 through 12, which will finish the year out with those grades next week.
Very good. We look forward to hearing about that, Kevin. Kyle.
Hi, my name is Kyle Aldis. I'm the Communication Director here at Singapore American School. We were on distance learning for about 2 months, and we just came back a couple days ago, and we will finish out the school year on Friday before rolling into our summer program.
Very good. And Kyle, you're one of those schools early on in January, February, March. You were in school while a lot of schools were out, and then you did a break. You call it the circuit breaker, I think, where you took a couple months to go online to make sure everything was tied together. But you've been in school for the majority of this COVID event. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
We look forward to hearing more. So why don't we jump in here? Wayne, you're up first. You're
Great. Thank you. Thanks, John. So as I mentioned, Milan, the American School Milan closed, one of the earliest schools in Europe to close February 24th. Jumped into online learning just in a day. We had a day of planning on campus. We had our first day of delivery on campus, and then we were forced to the police came and said, no, you can't be on campus. So everybody went home, and we've been teaching from home since then. We had hoped that we would open, whatever optimism I had for April was quashed, and then May, and then June not happening either. So we will close, as I said, with 17 weeks of online schooling, which included working through spring break and then parsing those days out to create some 3-day weekends, which we've been able to take a little bit of advantage of. Italy has started relaxing some of the lockdown measures. People have been able to travel within the province that they're in, Lombardia for us. And just today opened up the borders of the provinces so you can actually travel between provinces. So there's more and more freedom. We're under the guidance of the Ministry of Education. And so as we've been working towards our plans to reopen, we've been waiting for clear indications from the ministry. Because schools aren't going to open this school year, they haven't been very specific in what's going to happen. And that's made it a bit of a challenge. Our parents would like to know, hey, what are things going to look like in September? Tuition paying parents want to know that their kids are going to be in school 5 days a week in September. And we've been faced with the challenge of saying, look, we really don't know exactly what it's going to look like. We have 3 scenarios. Hopefully we're on campus with 100% of the kids 100% of the time. Likely we're going to be in a hybrid model with some on, some off. some homeschooling or some at-home learning. And then there's the possibility we'll be entirely with online learning again, though we hope that that's not the case. So it's been a challenge to, keep parents informed when so much is unknown to us as we await the government rollout of the edicts that'll tell us what schools need to look like. We were leaders when we started because we were one of the first schools closed in Europe and able to share out a lot. We were learning from our colleagues in China who had closed, and now it's our turn to be the learners as we watch schools in neighboring Switzerland reopen, France and Germany and other parts of Europe and the world get back to business. And that's been great because there are a lot of wonderful models, reopening playbooks and plans out there that we've been able to look at and crib from and work to model our own reopening plan on. But we're waiting for the definitive story of, is it a meter apart? Is it 2 meters apart? How many kids does that mean we can put into a classroom? Will they say 10 kids or 6 kids or 12 kids? And as school leaders, the ramifications of those kinds of dictates are just avalanches of complexity in terms of how many kids you can have in a class when you're supposed to have 20, or you're built around 20. Your budget, your staffing, everything is built around a model with 20 students in a class. And you're now going to have to split those kids into groups, and when are those groups being supervised and by whom, and how much time do the kids get on campus? So it's a very involved conversation that each one of our communities is somewhere in the middle of solving or having solved. And again, while we're sad to still be online and not be able to close the school year with some face-to-face conversations, congratulations, thanks, and goodbyes, we are benefiting from learning from our peers and other schools that have opened up with plans that they're executing and learning from those. So I'm really in a learning mode as we talk about this here, but we're all in this together, and it's been really quite an amazing experience to be involved in a crisis that's so completely global. And never before in my career of 20 years of school leadership has there been anything like this. Been through some crises, but they've been localized. This has been quite different and empowering. A lot of great collaboration. I appreciate everything that my peers and colleagues have shared. Thank you, John.
Yeah. And so Wayne, if I could, 4 things I think I took from your thing. So one is leaders are waiting on the government. So if anyone can share this video with government leaders, whether it's governors of states or prime ministers or whatever it would be, you are holding up decision-making on our schools. Like, all schools and businesses are trying to figure out how to get back in, but if we can't get clear direction, it's very hard to make decisions. But Wayne, you're coming up with 3 scenarios that will cover, no matter what the leadership comes back with, you have a path to get back in school. So you're planning around whatever comes back, you have a plan. So I just want to commend you on that. I think it's very thoughtful and well put together. And on your slide, you have stuff. So when we share these slides out, people will be able to click and look at your learning hub and different things you're doing at your school. So thank you, Wayne. Hopefully we'll get some questions for you as we go. Is that correct?
Thanks, John. And I can't say I'm the author of that 3-phase rollout to come back to school. Lots of schools are using that, and we've cribbed that from other sources. But thank you very much.
But that's why we're sharing here today, right? I think a lot of schools are sharing one with another. Who wants to be the pioneer here? Hey, Chuck, why don't you join us? Tell us a little about Central Catholic, what you're doing.
All right, so first I'm going to go where we are right now, because we're kind of at an important milestone. We're almost done. Again, we closed on March 16th. Remote learning was up March 18th. We've had a really, we've had hiccups along the way, but we've had overall a very solid, positive learning experience. We were able to do full grading, assessments. A lot of schools went pass fail. We were able to kind of maintain the learning experience at a level that we were happy with, and we got very positive feedback from parents. So that's something we're hoping to build on in the fall, whatever the learning scenarios are. This last week was a fun week for us. We were able to celebrate our seniors, our graduates. We had some in-person remote activities. We had a car parade that went over really well. Over the weekend, we had our teachers deliver diplomas to kids, following social distant guidelines, which I think meant a lot to the kids. We're still planning on an in-person graduation at the end of July. It seems like we're on track for that. But we also felt it was important to give the kids some emotional closure, to the sense that they had crossed the finish line, that they got their diploma as soon as we could. So we did that. that worked out really well. One thing we did is we let kids indicate who they wanted to send out, who they wanted to receive their diploma from. So they named 5 teachers. Every kid got either the first or their second choice, which we felt created a real, I think the teachers were really touched. So when they went to the houses, I think it was an emotional thing, because I think the teachers felt like they were selected. They said really positive things to the kids. It worked out really well. Really important closure for us. Last week of classes is this week. We're really looking forward to taking a breath and really looking into the fall. We're in the same boat as Wayne. There's a lot of uncertainty. So in Massachusetts, they've designated it's a 4-phase reopening. We're currently in phase 1, and each phase is kind of fluid. It's not definite. We could go back a phase. If we hit one phase and things take a turn, we could go back a phase. Phase 4 is the full reopening of schools, and that's essentially when vaccines are available. That's a kind of full return to normal. So in the meantime, we're also preparing scenarios, internal discussions. We haven't really communicated anything to our families yet, which they seem to have an issue with. Now they're starting to kind of ask. And so we really need to kind of put a plan, a message together saying, we don't know, this is what we're looking at. But again, there's a lot of different scenarios. We're not sure what it's going to look like. And again, we're really looking forward to taking that break and taking a breath, not a break, but taking a breath and really looking at it. But we feel positive because we were able to offer a really solid learning experience. And that's something we can definitely build on. We had moved into student life. We were offering some meaningful student life stuff. We were doing a combination of virtual events and some social distance activities, because the kids really want to be back on campus. They want to see each other. They want to, and we were able to offer a little bit of that to our seniors.
All right, let's keep going here. Chuck, you're getting some questions in the question box. You might want to jump in there and maybe answer some if you can see it. If not, we'll get them at the end also, because there's some good ones. And again, you have some good information on your site that can be shared out. Philippa.
Hi, thanks, John. Yeah, the UK, just to talk a bit about what the government has been requesting from schools. June the 1st, reception year 1 and year 6 pupils were asked to come back to school. The government also asked for some year 10 to 12 face-to-face contact at some stage this month, or certainly before the end of the summer term. And the aim for the government was that by the end of June, all primary age children would be back at school. But actually, the reality has been quite different, with quite a few councils, local councils in the UK, actually going against that government advice and advising their schools to only open if they felt that it was safe to do so. So it's been a really mixed picture with this first week of some school reopening. Now at Camford, we don't have junior school pupils, so we're year 9 to year 13. So the only age groups we were looking at were year 10 and 12 to be brought back. But actually the school has decided that we're not going to do that, because the online learning that we've been offering has been really successful, really well received. Our school actually ends on July the 3rd for the summer anyway, so we're continuing as we are. And there is quite a lot of discretion, I think, being given to schools to reopen only if they feel that they feel it's the right thing to do, and they can offer a good education from it. Like the others, so much is unknown about the new year. We're just looking at reopening plans at the moment. Various scenarios. We're, I suppose, in quite these sort of early stages of planning for that. And we are hoping that we're going to be able to bring pupils back onto the campus for September. The government at the moment is imposing a 14-day quarantine for anyone coming into the UK. So schools are starting to look at ways to bring back the international pupils with a 14-day lead time. But at the moment, we're not sure whether or not by the end of August that quarantine is still going to be in place. Just in terms of some of the things that we've been able to do during our remote programme, one of the year groups that's been particularly affected has been the upper 6th, because they've got no A-level exams, they're not sure about their university places, and therefore, you know, what was going to happen to those pupils this term. And schools have been brilliant in actually stepping up to give a really meaningful program to that particular year group. We've done a sort of life skills stroke, moving forward to university, career planning and so forth program, which has been really well received. The other thing that quite a few UK schools have done is that they have actually shifted their year groups up a year. So our GCSE year group, for example, with no exams, has actually started its A-level program. And quite a few schools have done that, which has kept the pupils really engaged and interested. So that's been a useful initiative, I think, too. And we were one of the first schools to actually hold a virtual open day, because we did have a day already in the calendar on the 25th of April, and we had about 100 people already booked in. So we had to very quickly make a decision to go virtual with our open day. But actually, it was hugely successful. We had about 200 families online. And, you know, I did just want to say that this isn't a particular plug for Finalsite, although it is, but, you know, without that platform and that support and that digital help, we would not have been able to have that level of success. And certainly as a schools marketer, I've not in the past used Zoom, Teams, a lot of this remote communication. And I think that has been a brilliant result coming out of a crisis, that we've actually been able to look at the ways that we're doing things, and as the others have said, learn from other schools that have already been using this technology. So I think there have been a lot of positives that have come out of a very negative situation for us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's, again, it's really interesting as we go around the world to see where folks are at and where schools are. And it's becoming more regional now, and how bad the outbreak was in your area, depending on the opening and the plan. So thank you for sharing that. And we'll get back with more questions. So let's go to the Singapore American School.
Yeah, so the last time we hopped on here, we were at the start of our distance learning, unlike a lot of our colleagues who had already been in the mix. And so we learned a lot from watching them as they did that process. So it was very helpful to have those plans that we were able to draw from. So the government did something that they called a circuit breaker, which basically meant that we were all basically told to stay indoors for 2 months. And so we've been running distance learning for that period of time. And then toward the end, about 2 weeks ago, we got the clear that we would be able to return to campus, but we would have to submit plans that followed a certain set of guidelines, and then those plans would have to then be approved. And so I'll run you through just very quickly some of the things that that are in place as we return to campus yesterday. So for instance, our preschool, pre-K, and kindergarten teachers all had to be COVID tested because they work with our youngest learners. Now, unfortunately, because there's a backup in the queue for testing, they weren't all able to be tested, which means that today we just had to actually cancel the return to campus for our preschool, pre-K, and kindergarten students. We have to keep capacity under 50%. We do staggered arrivals and dismissals, temperature checks. Students wear masks or face shields. Faculty are allowed to wear face shields while they teach, but in other scenarios have to wear masks. Students have to observe and do fixed seating. So that's something that for our students is very different than what we're used to with a lot of the flexible learning environments that we have on campus. So to have a student who's assigned to one seat and they cannot leave that seat, because that's how the government allows us to be able to do the contact tracing if we need to do that. We can't do food this week on campus. All adults have to do a safe entry. They have to check in using an app as they come in. We don't have parents coming on campus. There's no intermingling between divisions. It's interesting that a lot of this has been happening, and we're doing this right at the same period of time that that our tuition is due for next year. So the timing is interesting on some of this as we return back to campus. And we still have, foreign passport holders are not allowed to enter Singapore. So when I think about, that list of things that we've been asked to do, and I think about some of the major decisions that we've had to make over the past few weeks as we've prepared to come back, one of those is, as we think about families who are trying to come here next year, which we have about 300 new families who'd be arriving, as well as all of the new faculty. None of them have employment passes or anything to be able to come. And we had to make the decision as to what to do with the incoming faculty. And the decision was made to honor those contracts regardless of what happens. So even if they don't come in at the start of fall because the government regulations don't allow them to come in just yet, we're going to find a way to get them integrated into the culture, into the community, but they're going to have to do it from a distance. And same with the new families, which I think, John, to your point earlier, puts us in that position where likely we're going to be running some type of hybrid model as we move into the fall, which is something that we had very much hoped we wouldn't have to do. And so we'll continue to play that one by ear. And the other decision that we made was, as we knew that we would be coming to the end of the circuit breaker, where we'd be allowed to come back to campus for a short period of time, we made the decision to try and create a plan for our summer semester program. We typically run a summer semester that allows students from all over Singapore and the region, really, to be able to come in and experience SAS. And it's often a great way for us to get people to experience what life is like at SAS, because they have our actual faculty run the program. They get to be on campus. This time around, what we've decided to do is just keep it to our community. And so it can only be SAS families that participate, but we've extended the length of time. So we do 6 individual 1-week sessions for each of those courses. And we've had an overwhelming response. Faculty have been excited to create new courses, and they had to do all of this in the span of about a week as we prepared to come back. So we now have over 3,000 different registrants for over 100 different courses that will take place beginning next week into July. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now as far as all of the logistics of coming back to campus. And then what we're looking at as far as finishing out the school year this week and then moving into our summer program beginning after that for the 6 weeks after.
So Kyle, and again, there's some new people on this from before, but in January, February, March, you were actively going to school and you were taking temperature at the door. Could you give it just a little, just very quickly, maybe in 30 seconds, what you were doing to get people back into school and the kids? Because you have 4,000 students that go to your school.
Yeah, we have 4,000 students on one campus, and really the main priority is health and safety. And then also ensuring that, you know, we rely on the government, like many of the other schools and our colleagues here that have mentioned. The Ministry of Education, they have set guidelines. And so it's some of the things that I mentioned about the temperature taking and having to complete the Safe Entry app and the distancing in the classrooms. All of those things are things that we have to ensure happen, because the government has also said that they will do random spot checks and that at any moment somebody could come by to ensure that obviously you're in compliance.
Yep. Well, really love the effort your school's making to get the students back there. And one thing you said that was very interesting to me is how do we get kids back to school before we go back in September? Okay. And doing some sort of summer program or something in the summer to, one, get the teachers back involved or the students, and run some we call them beta tests in the software world, but run some, samplings that you could see how it would work and students could see how it work, and how do you wear masks and how do you go down the halls, what works, what doesn't work. I thought that was a really good point there in connecting that. Thank you, Kyle. Let's keep going here. Kevin.
Thanks.
Kevin, could you even share about your graduation too, and what was deployed there? I think that was pretty special also, but go ahead.
For sure. Yeah. I think the graduation kind of falls under one of the themes that we had when we first created our communications plan in February, when we realized that we were going to be closed more than, just a couple of weeks that we assumed. We talked about, communications, making sure we're informing, we're inspiring, and there was a third one. Inspiring was the third. But we also had as part of that plan to return loudly. And I think that frame of mind has been really helpful as we've come back. So we started coming back May 6th with two grade levels, and then it's gone to two, and this last week has been 3. And by having this sort of mentality of returning loudly, I think you can kind of look at how a school experiences based on government regulations, based on concerns for safety. And it's, you know, it's hard to kind of feel brave. It's hard to feel confident about that. You've got social distancing, you've got facilities that are likely closed. For us, a lot of our signature programs feel a lot less signature just based on the restrictions that we have to live under. And I think there's a tendency amongst some of our mindsets, other schools' mindsets, is you're just, you know, you're doing what you can. And I think we've taken this return loudly in kind of a way that's helped affect our community in a really positive way. So now every single week that we get new kids back, we release on social media a video about that particular division, which was all shot in one day earlier in the fall. And all this, and it's all put to music. And so there's not a whole lot of information to be had, but it's man, let's look at us on our best day. Let's look at SAS as we can be. And I think that has really, you know, inspired some nice things. Looking at all that signage that we have, and I know this sounds small, but we've basically been inspired by children's hospitals where, you know, if a kid goes through a CAT scan, they don't go through a CAT scan. They decorate it as a buccaneer ship, and they put a pirate's cap on the kid. And, you know, all of a sudden, like, I think there's ways to kind of frame in a much more positive way something that feels like it's less than what you wish. You know, so for our signage, we you know, say, you know, be a superhero, wear your mask. Or, you know, we had, you know, we have to have a quarantine tent. And so we tried to brand it as the VIP tent, because if your temperature's a little higher, well, you get to go where other people don't get to go, and you get a little extra attention. And you know, we thought it was a really kind of nice, lighthearted, you know, way to do that. The people who didn't feel it was such a nice, lighthearted way as the health officials. So it's still called the quarantine tent, but I do think that mentality has been really helpful, and that's really carried over into our graduation as well. Instead of looking at this and going, all right, we have to move what's been a really terrific in-person ceremony to something that's online, and immediately you kind of feel a sense of loss there. We said, no, the challenge that our school leadership gave to us and to the high school divisions, and we helped out along the way, was how do we make the class of 2021 jealous of the class of 2020? And again, I think that's a sort of return loudly mentality. That's not saying, hey, let's do, you know, cobble together what we can. It's no, let's kind of exceed what we would normally do. And by, you know, I think we were able to do that in a lot of respects, partly by not just looking at this as a ceremony, but looking at this with kind of, we call it kind of the shoulders. You've got your event here, but you've got a lead up to the event. You've got things that last long beyond the event that can kind of give it a little bit more of a long tail. And so we looked at graduation more as a, you know, a couple week experience at least. And so when we worked with Finalsite to put up our graduation site, the first thing we did was put a countdown. And it's like this big sort of drum roll to an online graduation. And automatically that kind of shifts your mentality to say, gosh, is this going to be so good that it's worth a 2-week drum roll? And then we social media things the week before. Our buses, we have 167 different buses, and each of them has their own unique design. And so we dedicated one of the buses to the class of 2020. And then when we the actual event that night, we actually worked with Finalsite to stage our website, not as you flip it on and ta-da, here's your graduation ceremony, but rather pacing it out similar to how you would pace out an actual event. And so each section went live, and you had a little countdown to when the next section went live, then the next one on down. And I think that was really helpful. The other piece that has been kind of one of the more popular parts of that graduation was, you know, again, really thinking of the audience and going, you know, they're still, even with the countdown, they're going online for graduation, and some of them are spread all around the world. And so we started with a video from an alum from the class of 1949 saying, hey, you know what, I know how you feel, because the same thing happened to me. And she talks just about how her senior year was affected by, as it turns out at that time, it was the end of a war here in China. And they were affected just as the class of 2020 was, where the class got a bit smaller. By the end of the year, they were all spread out. A lot of the sort of big events and milestones that they had looked forward to were canceled. And it's a really, really powerful sort of emotional start that, again, like, suddenly people were not engaged in an online graduation. They were as engaged and sort of emotionally pulled in as they would be if they were there in person. So, we had another thing where a couple of parent groups had watch parties. So they pulled together a couple hundred people to watch a website go live, which is funny. And that was right on the Bund, which is sort of the big river area here in Shanghai. And so we created a video that night, like we had our team out there just with iPhones, pulled together a nice fancy video. And before the celebration even ended, that people were already on WeChat sharing this video of them, live on the Bund. It was sort of how it was teamed. And then the sort of long tail part of that was talking about creating a memorial for the class of 2020 and really for the community to kind of mark the fact that this has been a crazy time. The last thing I'll mention is that we're now creating a documentary as well called 104 Days, where we're capturing people's experiences, the decisions they had to make, the regrets they had, or the joys that they had, the adversity as well as the difficulty that they've gone through. Again, to really kind of mark how this is as a community and kind of help us kind of process it and come together a bit stronger in the fall. And so again, I think all that was born out of this mentality of return loudly. In terms of how the whole experience is affecting us in the fall, we too have, as Kyle mentioned, we have people who can't come into China right now. About 30% of our families, over 50% of our faculty. And so we have contingency plans of how we would go about opening in the fall. But just as we returned loudly in the spring and got a sort of beta tests of working under the restrictions that we have, we're pretty confident in the fall that while it might not be the experience that we would wish, we think it's going to be pretty terrific.
So Kevin, just to go back to opening, just real quick. So you're going to do a hybrid solution in the fall, is that correct? So you'll be able to offer online and offline, and you're going to have to stagger kids a little bit, taking temperature at the door. Are you doing stuff like that?
Yeah, so we take temperatures at the door. It is China, so the rules change every week. It's kind of a fun little game we play. Yeah, we have an app now that's part of our transportation app for the school that people can do their daily health checks through that. We've got a QR code that is tied into some of the local popular apps here, which monitor your health and all that good type stuff. So sometimes it's paper form, sometimes it's the app, sometimes it's the QR code. Always it's temperatures and everyone's washing their hands at every turn. So that's already happening, and that will we assume that will continue in the fall. As to exactly what our school looks like in the fall will depend in part on what we're allowed to do, who we're allowed to bring in the fall. So we're absolutely prepared for a hybrid model. We certainly prefer an in-person model, but I think the last 4 months has given us a lot of confidence to say we can pull off whatever needs to be done.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. And you have a lot of good resources that are in these slides that people can click on later, but thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Jon Michton.
I really want to kind of echo what Wayne said at the beginning is the amount of sharing and generosity from different schools. So pretty much everything that I'm going to describe regarding our reopening and what we're looking at in the fall really goes credit to the amount of time we were able to spend with Nanjing International School's leadership team and the Copenhagen International School. We spend a lot of time talking to them. They opened before us, they have different contexts, and we found that very helpful. And I echo what Wayne says, is this the collaborative nature, and there's no way of being able to do this alone, and there's no handbook. And I think we can only leverage each other's experiences. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that. We've been open since May 11th. We're under on the guidelines of the Ministry of Education. So we brought in 50% of our grade 6 through 10 students. They have social distancing, 2 meters apart. They have to wear masks at all times. We have a temperature check. We can get 300 kids through the temperature check in about 20 minutes. And then half the cohort is at home. We're using Schoology as our virtual online platform. There's a component called Schoology Conferences. So the teacher has the screen up, they can see the kids at home, and the kids at home can see the kids in the classroom, and they kind of work together. They have a chat room, whiteboards, and breakout rooms, and those different dynamics are being used. We then brought a second cohort into the lower school, and that was 2 weeks later. There, again, the one thing that we realized for many students, it's been quite traumatic, and we don't know where they're coming from in their home situation, what their experience is. So we put superheroes everywhere in the high school, life-size cutouts. We had the grade 12 art students decorate all the windows, so when people came back, they got a big welcome back. In the lower school, we had an archway of balloons. All the leadership team got dressed up like Harry Potter characters. We had minions everywhere. So the idea was to make it really positive, because it really, that dynamic of only being half the kids, having to be 2 meters apart, and all those restrictions really dampen the kind of the enthusiasm. And it's been amazing how the kids have been resilient and really engaged with that. In our faculty, it's gone much smoother than we anticipated. We have about 46 faculty that did not come back because of vulnerabilities. So the Ministry of Health in Luxembourg has a list of people and situations that are considered vulnerable. So they're working from home. We did have the pinch point of having to get a lot of subs and juggle that. But that's kind of worked out. We've had a lot of input from parents, and we've been communicating through our Finalsite daily updates to the parent community with videos, screencasts, really making it as transparent as possible. So every day the parents have an update, actual pictures of what it looks like in the classrooms, and questions and answers and resources. And that's something that we as a crisis team meet every day, and we curate that communication that's then released through the site, and then also communicated to the students through our LMS and to all the faculty through email. And that's one thing we've really been working with. For the fall, we're looking at 3 scenarios. We're crossing our fingers. Luxembourg has opened up. Restaurants are open. Bars are open. Theaters, of course, 2 meters social distancing. But I think we were talking prior, you know, masks on chins and masks on foreheads, to quote Wayne previously. I think, you know, everybody has been confined, and there's this beautiful weather and people just want to get out and about. But we're crossing our fingers. We've had no deaths in 8 days and very low counts. So we're thinking that maybe we're getting into a place where this more contained social distancing openness is something that's sustainable. Of course, the borders have opened, our airport is opened, and people are already thinking about holidays. So we don't know what that will look like over the summer when we come back. But we're looking at 3 scenarios. One is just school as normal, as what we would consider normal, so everybody come as usual. A hybrid, so all the departments and the leadership team, we're looking at a hybrid. So we're looking at partially virtual, partially social distancing face-to-face, the model that we currently have. And the other one is online, and we're juggling that. We do have to follow the guidelines of the Ministry of Education. We don't have much leniency, and we were not able to do a graduation, and we just got good news today. We can have a graduation with social distancing in one of our big auditoriums. So that's very positive news. But anything that we do has to be in sync with the Ministry of Health and the other Luxembourg public schools. So we do have to work with those guidelines, and we have parameters to be flexible and creative within those, but often there are things that we would like to do that we can't. And we, of course, honor that because we want to be guided by the experts and the scientists and the health department that gives us those guidelines. So that's where we are. We're, you know, have learned so much. And I think in the learning, one thing we've learned is the importance of being transparent and open and putting things out publicly for other people to grab and not feel ownership of it, and be out there to say, yes, of course, take this. We're happy to sit down with you and talk. And those kind of conversations have made us much more resilient and I think more effective. We've learned a lot about what we shouldn't do, and we've learned a lot about what we should be doing, and being able to pivot and be flexible within those feedback loops is really important. And I think there is no special good plan. Every country is different. We have parameters that are unique to our government, to our culture, to where we live. And down the road, somebody could have something very different. I was talking to 2 Swiss schools. They're 20 minutes apart. They have completely different reopening architectures because of their local governments having different philosophies on how to do it. So I think one should always look at any program or any reopening plan with a pinch of salt and say, oh, some things that we can take and some things we can adapt, but we don't have the answers. We just have one option that we hope people on our public website, feel free to go there, grab whatever works for you. And if we can help you, or if you have questions, reach out. We really want to return the generosity that was given to us by the larger international school community.
Okay, Jon, thank you very much. And all of you are doing an amazing job, I have to say. And there's many schools on the call here sharing in the chat and Q&A. And thank you, panelists, for jumping in there and answering some of that. So I'm just going to jump into, before we get into Q&A here, we have really, at Finalsite, it's been amazing. We've been able to work with schools since January on this. And we really pivoted to helping schools change the way they think and pivot to becoming a digital campus. So instead of just having a website and using it for marketing, schools are using it for their whole campus now. And the value prop to the school has changed. So we think about community relations, like Jon Michtin, you have like a place where you're sending all of your parents and students. Online fundraising has changed. So we're having people go in and they're doing fundraising online, and they're actually getting more attendance online than they did in their person events. Virtual admissions microsites. But schools are able to pick and choose now how they need to do this. But we really feel this is the model that a school has to have in place for going in the future. And most of the schools on this call do have this, from a distance learning hub to how do you support students, like pages around that, parent community communication hubs and portals. And then we get down to like mobile apps, live streaming. I know, Jon Michtin, you talked about Google. If you're in China, you're not using Google Classroom, you're using other products. But if you're outside of China, we have a lot of schools using Google Classroom or Schoology or those. But it all connects back to the Learning Hub, where you send your parents all to one area, and the experience is a lot better than with social media feeds, inbound marketing and email communications, to the digital marketing services around SEO, PPC, so your virtual stuff comes together. But this is the campus that a lot of you have implemented, and I think it's pretty amazing looking at what your schools have done. So this is just some areas of stuff we have built. We've actually built microsites. So whether you're a Finalsite customer or not, if you wanted to just plug in a virtual microsite that you could do more online to show your students, we have that available. We have just learning hubs if you want to plug it into your current Finalsite site or you're not. And then online fundraising, you know, just change the way you do it. And, you know, this type of stuff, we can have you up in less than 30 days. To have you live with this type of technology, just to plug it in. Whether it's distance learning, parent communications, enrollment, or fundraising, moving forward, your school's online experience will help define the quality, perception, and value of your education. I'm seeing lots of questions right now around, are you charging differently at your school for a hybrid environment? If they're not going to come back and they're going to be online, is the tuition different? What happens if you're all online and it's not hybrid? Is your tuition price different? So we're going to do a live poll, and then we're going to jump into questions. Okay, while we're going through this, I'm going to go back to Chuck. Are you thinking about different types of pricing going back? And I know no one has to be absolute here, because I'm sure some are in conversation, but are you thinking about different if you're hybrid or not, or online?
Well, we had gotten some pushback on that when we went to remote learning about whether we were still going to be charging the full tuition. And our president answered it very well in terms of, he talked about our main cost is teachers. And the teachers are still working in some ways much harder than they were before. So his response to parents was, do you expect us to pay our teachers less? Because you see what they're doing with your kids and you know how committed they are to your kids. So we were able to forestall that. I don't think we're considering that, because we still have to, especially if it's going to be hybrid, even if it's not fully in person, the expenses are still there. So I don't think it's something that we're currently considering now. We are reaching out to families who are having, in terms of the economic situation, families reach out to us about that, but that's a separate discussion in terms of increased financial aid rather than a reduced tuition.
Okay, anyone else on the call doing something interesting around tuition and online?
I think similar to what Chuck is doing, we're supporting parents because of the economic situation, payment plans, but we, again, are not going to charge any differently than we have previous to this situation. And similar feedback has been shared with parents because in our context too, teachers are the most expensive cost, and we want to make sure we can provide that exemplary teaching. So but we are definitely talking to parents that need support. They can, looking at helping them that way.
So that's interesting. So are you communicating out to your families around the cost of the school and the percentage of cost of where it's driven and why you're keeping your tuition where it's at? Anyone else have any thoughts on this? Kyle, Kevin, Wayne, Philippa?
Yeah, I think it's important that parents have an understanding of the extent to which your budget is personnel, and then that personnel, converts directly into the quality of product that you're offering. Because I think a lot of people don't understand that personnel costs can be, upwards of 80% of an independent school's budget, and that's normal. It's good if you can show them that that's normal. But I think that's kind of a face straightener for parents when they get that perspective. And then you say, yeah, well, which teacher do you think we should pay less? They might give you an answer, or they might just say you.
Yeah, but I think like just in business in general, you're showing your value prop. That's the value. It's your teachers that are the value of putting that education across. And I think we need to communicate as schools what the value is that they're paying for and where that cost is. I think that's great. Kevin, you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one of the differentiations we've made already in the period of 104 days where we were closed was that we recognized that what we could deliver in terms of distance learning probably had the biggest impact, not in a positive way, on our pre-K and kindergarten students. And so we did give parents the option of opting out of, offering a prorated refund for the rest of the semester. This past semester, the majority stayed in the program. I think the teachers were doing what they can, but just in terms of what a kid would get in that in-person experience versus an online, they were probably the most severely impacted. And so, if in the fall we're forced to do an online model, we'd probably look at that again. We felt like that was fair. That's all.
Actually, I would echo what Kevin just said, because we did something similar with our preschool and pre-K students for the block of time that we were out. They are the ones who likely suffer the most, for lack of a better word, because it's just hard to manage that digitally. So we did a flat rate payment that we offered families that they were able to take advantage of during that time, and still continue. They were able to continue through with the program, but we just gave a portion of that back to the families.
Very good. What about summer programs? Anyone didn't do summer camps or summer programs? I know, Kyle, you had something going. Anyone else doing something over the summer?
We currently are still planning to go ahead with some sort of summer sports camp at this point, but we're just waiting to see. It's supposed to be sort of first week of August. We're just waiting to hear really government guidance, local health guidance and so forth in terms of social distancing, whether or not we could still run our program, but perhaps with some slightly different sporting options, which allow for social distancing. But at this point, it's possible that we may be able to offer something.
Good. Anyone else?
Yeah, we too are going to allow the maximum we can under local regulations. So the local regulations are still coming together, but we're prepared to take advantage of whatever they come back with.
John, I think there's, John, I just think there's going to be a real growth in badminton leagues. And so you should be looking into buying a lot of badminton rackets and nets.
Yeah. Or pickleball, something like that.
Pickleball, it's a sport that works, yeah.
What about if the kids are going back? I think in the U.S. there's a lot of U.S. schools on here. In Asia, people are used to wearing masks. It's a little more common ground. So are the kids, you're planning to go back and all kids in high school wearing masks, or all kids under 8th grade? Does everyone have to wear masks? Like, what does that look like in your area?
I would say in Shanghai, we are ahead of that curve, both from a city standpoint as well as a school standpoint. From a city standpoint, they've lowered the warning level to the point where you don't have to wear a mask. You do so if you want to be polite and respectful and what have you, but it's not necessary. And then we just earlier this week received notice that the restrictions even within the school is really loosening up. So we're a week and a half away from the end of the school year. I'm not sure how much more change we want to throw at our students there, but we do have most of the campus experience now is optional for wearing masks.
So I want to share that, because in the we're all at different stages. China has done their lockdown. You're coming out. They had 2 waves, if I'm correct, of the virus, and I think 2 waves, or maybe it's lighter in some cities. But the concept is the masks are becoming optional in a lot of areas as you work through this. So I want to give U.S. schools hope that they're not going to have to try to keep every kid with a mask on going back to school by the time we get there. I think that's really important, because I think a lot of schools are struggling, like, how do we support this administratively, the cost, like, do we go out and buy a bunch of masks now? Do we, like, there's just so many questions around it. But I guess where I'm going is, you guys are ahead of us in what's going on, and there's hope that you could be back in school in a more normal environment than we're looking at today when we get to September. Would you agree with that, Kevin?
Very much, and I think your point on the multiple waves is a good one. Shanghai has, for the most part, done just a wonderful job of controlling the spread of the virus since the beginning. And so, I wouldn't say that Shanghai itself has had a second wave. There's certainly been areas in China that have had some spikes there, but no one's surprised if we have to back off on some of these loosening of restrictions. But we're certainly taking advantage while we can. And I think part of it's the cost that you mentioned, but the other part of it, and I saw that in a couple of the questions that folks asked, is just that ability to have that connection, to have that facial recognition of the students. And there's so much expression that comes from the nose down that you kind of miss out on. And so I think that has been probably the biggest mention of our teachers, not being able to be heard in a loud classroom, but even more just that connection with students.
All right, we're almost done here, but what I would like to just encourage schools to do is don't wait to August to put your plan together for the fall. It takes a lot of work. I know, Jon Michtin, you're very strong on the technology side. Thank you for coming and sharing what your school's doing. But having those hubs and digital campus stuff in place, you need to do it now and don't wait too long. I just want to encourage schools, whether you're a Finalsite customer or not, it doesn't matter. Get your plans in place. And I think we're hearing 3 plans, be ready for all of them. But if you look at what's happened in China, assuming the virus follows that around the world, there's a very good chance we're going to be back to school in a lot more normal fashion than we're imagining today. I'm an optimistic person, but I do think we're going to have that. But you have to be prepared to have online working better than it did this spring that we just went through. And you really need your plans in place. But I think it's going to be better than we expect. We're coming out of some dark months here, but I think there's going to be a lot of hope as we go into the fall and back to school. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming. I think it's a gift to have everyone from around the world. I think just being the CEO at Finalsite and being able to interact and crowdsource information is also amazing. I don't think we're done doing this. I know we're on number 4, but I feel a number 5 in the future, especially as we're working through the summer and truly planning. I think the next one has to be 100% on opening and very detailed of what each school is doing around the world. But part of the reason I want to do this is for hope. I want teachers and administrators to look at this and say, there is hope. We can make it there. There are different stages and we are going to get through this. So again, thank you everyone. I know there's a lot of questions we didn't get to. We apologize, but I think all of you on this are willing to share. So if they reach out directly, connect on LinkedIn, we're all willing to help each other here. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye. Thank you.